Well, welcome in, everyone. It is great to have you here. You're watching P3, the Pro Production Podcast. It is our ultimate camera stream. My name is Nick Olson. I'm your host. And it's great to have you here. We've been working very, very hard this week to make this stream look, sound great, and be as informative about cameras as possible. And tonight, we're going to try to summarize, basically, the differences between major cameras, major live production cameras. So we have cameras that range from broadcast cameras to DSLRs, pocket cinema cameras, some of the most popular cameras that are being used today in live event production. So we're right here. We're here from our studio, from our shop. We have a bunch of people around doing some different jobs in CG here, and then we've got the guys out on the studio floor. So at this point in time, I want to welcome them in. It's great to have them here, and we're still working through some things, but we feel pretty good about the stream, and we really hope that you guys are going to enjoy it as well. So right now, I want to welcome them in on the floor. It's Brady Davis and AJ Fager. Guys, how are you?
We're doing actually, I think okay. I think we're doing okay. Lots and lots of setup, and always comes down to the wire, but it is what it is, you know?
Yeah, we weren't running around the last seconds at all, were we?
We may or may not have gotten one of these cameras working at the exact last minute, and I'll throw that out to Brady because he definitely was the one who got that one running at the exact last minute. So there you go. I was busy fixing my hair and putting on makeup. So
yeah, we always say that the best time to do things is the last second in live production, right?
Well,
you don't want to have any time to prepare at all. So
if you look back to your favorite moments of production, it's always those last minute items that stick in your mind, and they're the most fun because things miraculously work.
The good news is it is definitely a camera we're excited to show, so we'll definitely, when we get to that point, we'll definitely talk about it. But I also have to remember not to skip over it because I don't think we even put it in the outline, so we'll have to remember to do that one.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Hey, so real quick, I want to talk about one thing before we get started here with the camera stream tonight, and it's this. We are doing a Lavo swag pack giveaway. Yep, that's right. The company's name there that's spelled L-A-W-O, they're German. It's Lavo. So Lavo swag pack giveaway tonight. So that's really exciting. All you have to do to be eligible to win that is like P3, like the Pro Production Podcast on Facebook. That's going to be facebook.com/Pro Production Podcast, as well as share this stream. So that's the only thing you have to do.
Nick, we should also do a YouTube requirement. You also have to subscribe on YouTube so we can get our permalink.
Yes,
there you go.
Right. So we're and a reminder, we're live on YouTube and we're live on Facebook tonight. On our YouTube page, we need you to subscribe so we can get the permalink and stay tuned for more great P3 content. And we're going to be covering cameras the next couple of weeks as well, which is going to be awesome. But yeah, so and then that's not a requirement, but go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube as well. And hey, if you're watching on Facebook, the quality's great at Facebook, but it's not as good as it is on YouTube. On YouTube, you're going to be able to see the quality of the cameras a lot better. So make sure you maybe have both of them pulled up. It'll help the metrics, I guess. So yeah, with all that being said, we're watching your questions in chat. Also, we're watching them on the Facebook chat as well as the YouTube chat, and also. This might get a bit overwhelming because there's a lot of people watching tonight. I popped into chat beforehand and saw someone say, Bryce said, "Good day from Gold Coast, Australia." So there's a lot of people watching tonight, but we are opening up the phone lines for your questions as we can get to them. The phone number is 317 AJ 586-2844. Is
That's
that right?
It. 586-2844.
Good job, Nick.
Area code 317-586-2844. We're going to be opening up the phone line there as well.
Probably towards the end of the show, I think, right?
Yeah, well, and we'll see what we can get to. But yeah, so we're going to be taking your questions though via the chat as well. And really welcome everyone. It's great to have you in. Someone said, "What's the YouTube link in chat?" If we could post that in the chat, that'd be great too, on the Facebook chat too. So, with all that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get started. AJ, Brady, what do you got for us?
Well, yeah. I think we wouldn't be doing it justice if we didn't start with kind of a rundown. So let's actually switch over to this camera here, and we'll kind of give you guys the grand tour of the area we're working with over here. So as you can see, this is all the gear we have going on. We've got most of the RCPs for most of the cameras that have RCPs. We are going to talk a little bit about that. We are running a Ross Carbonite Ultra to do all of our switching tonight for our camera stream, and then That's Brady's Facebook over there up. And Brady's pretty much going to be manning the switcher tonight. So if there's any switcher mess ups, it's because we're great at installing this gear. We're not always great at necessarily running it.
Well,
but,
we install so much that we don't really get to play with it.
Yeah, we don't
as
get to
much.
play with it as much. So anyway, so now we're getting to play with a lot of the gear. So we'll see how well this goes. So here we go. So anyway, I think we should probably just dig right into cameras, unless you have anything else to add,
I say
Brady.
let's talk through what cameras we're using first.
Yeah. So,
that way we can get a rundown of the night, and then people can start gearing up their questions for what they might want to use.
Yeah, so we'll go through all the cameras that we have tonight. Now, just keep in mind, all of these cameras are not indicative of all of the cameras that are obviously available in each one of these lines. We kind of wanted to represent each one of these lines the best we could, and the best to what was available to us at the time. We're going to be starting with a Canon 6D, which we'll dig into the weeds on this one. This is a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. This is a Panasonic AG CX350. And then this is a Blackmagic URSA Broadcast right here. The URSA Broadcast is fully kitted out with a Fuji lens, with the 2x extenders, fiber back, all that stuff. This is the VariCam LT. This has a Cabrio 85 to 300, I think is what it has.
I believe it's a 35 to 300 on it.
Sorry, 35? Yeah, you might be right. This
No,
is
85 to 300.
Okay, this is a Cabrio 85 to 300 with servo zoom and focus. This is a PL lens. This is not a B4 lens. This is a PL cinema lens. And then this has a multi-dyne fiber back on it with SMPTE fiber running to a CCU. And then this is the Hitachi ZHD 5500 with a Digipower, with a Fujifilm Digipower 55 on it. Also fed with SMPTE fiber. And yeah, so and the one I'm going to forget about that came up at the last minute is the Panasonic. Oh gosh, it's the 150 PTZ that I really like. Someone's going to have to text me that.
This is
model
the
number.
UE150.
The
from
UE150.
Panasonic,
Thank you.
using the
Thank you.
RP150 controller.
Yeah, no, it's the 150. Yeah, the
correct.
The UE150 PTZ camera. I am a little rusty on model numbers, so you'll have to forgive me, but this PTZ is actually one of my favorite PTZ cameras, and we'll go over some of the basic features on it. We are going, just an FYI, for the cameras that we are going to be digging a little bit deeper into the coming weeks. So pretty much every Tuesday for at least the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to be digging a little bit deeper into some of these cameras and doing more side-by-side shootouts and things like that.
Yeah, I think that we talked about next week we were going to do the Hitachi and the Blackmagic, right? We're going to do that.
So, yeah.
So the big one that everyone we know wants to see is that the Blackmagic camera, the URSA broadcast camera, and dig into it to more. So next week we're gonna put it up with we're gonna do broadcast cameras next week. So we'll have an FB80, a Sony FB80, the Hitachi HD 5500, as well as the broadcast, the URSA broadcast. So yeah, it'll be a good stream next week. So make sure you join us. It's Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
And I do think that we will be including the UE150 in that as well, just because it does compare very well to full-size broadcast cameras. It's really one of the first PTZs in its class, in my opinion. Really all-in-one. It's actually got dual outputs, which we won't feature tonight, but we will feature in the coming weeks. We ran out of available frame syncs on our switchers, so so anyway, the UE150 looks great. It's got dual outputs. And it's just a really powerful camera, but we'll dig into that one deeper in the coming weeks, but we will at least show you a picture of it tonight. To give you an idea, and I don't think we actually measured that, did we? Did we get a measurement on the distance to the chart? I'm going to call it about 30 feet.
I've got my handy dandy laser.
I believe it's 30 feet, given the tiles on the floor.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to call it about 30 feet. So anyway, we are shooting a chip chart tonight. And that's just going to kind of be our baseline reference. It is a DSC Labs chip chart. It's a rather large one, and that's just going to be kind of a base color reference for us, just so we can kind of get an idea of how these cameras look and also discuss some of those things as well. So anyway, I guess without further ado, let's dig into a camera. All right, so this is the camera we are going to start with. This is a Canon 6D, and admittedly, I am not a professional in some of these cameras, so there may be a way to get them to look better. But given the limited time that we had tonight and everything else that we were kind of doing to put into this, we didn't spend as much time on some of these cameras as we probably should have, but oh well. So anyway, 22 and a half feet is our distance to the chip chart. Nick, and how tall Nick, how tall is the chart? How tall? Yeah, just so people can get a reference for framing.
Go to the back of your laser.
I think it's about 2 feet. Yeah, so this chart's about 2 feet tall. It's a rather large chip chart. So, yeah, about 2.5 feet. So anyway, we'll get more precise on that when we actually start doing more shootouts and everything like that. But so the 6D. So to kind of dig into it here, the DSLR and other mirrorless cameras, we're only talking about them tonight because they can be used for video. They specifically can be used for live video. These are going to be good cameras if you guys already own them, if they're already an option. I would say if you're starting from scratch for live video, there might be some better options. Now, we're going to be specifying some differences tonight. So when we say live video, we mean a live broadcast type scenario. So that would be, a stage broadcast, a church broadcast, whatever it might be. When we say live video, that's essentially what we're talking about. We're also going to be talking briefly about cinematography as just another type of shooting that can be done. And then obviously this is a photography camera, so that's really all there is to it. But anyway, so this is a photography camera that is capable of shooting video, and it can be used. It's more capable of cinematography than it is of live video. However, it can be used in a live environment if you need to. The pros of these cameras are going to be that they're more versatile and they have a lower cost of entry. So any of the DSLR or mirrorless style cameras are going to have a lower cost of entry, and they're going to be a little bit more versatile. So the cons are that there is no native SDI. So for a live production, you pretty much always want SDI to be native on your camera as much as possible. So to feed this into the switcher, tonight we're actually running into a Decimator MDHX, and then that's feeding into the switcher, which also has a frame sync, so we don't have to run separate gen lock or anything like that. The other downside to doing it that way can also be that it adds latency. So it's not necessarily an ideal camera for iMag environments because you're going to get quite a bit of latency on your foldback monitors in the room or whatever it might be. So,
not to mention, you also have another point of failure that you're always going to have to be thinking about through your production is that converter and that's power supply.
Yeah. I actually have yet to have a Decimator power supply fail, but I'm sure someone has. So, we'll see. But so far they've been reliable. The other downside is going to be battery life. You're pretty much going to need a large external battery and or some form of DC power.
Yeah, that one right now has a DC battery insert that I just purchased off of Amazon for it. Okay. So, you can buy, I believe that Canon makes a real one. I just bought that. That was kind of a knockoff, I think, that I purchased on Amazon. But Amazon does make a real one.
Canon makes a real one.
Canon makes a real one. Amazon doesn't make a real one. Canon makes a real one. But yeah, I think that was like $30 for the DC power supply there. So, but it comes out. That one's got the double battery, whatever it's called, insert on the bottom, and it does kind of come out funky, and the cord has to get pinched in there weird. But anyways, yeah.
So I think the only and then the other side of DSLR mirrorless cameras or any form of cinematography is that they very quickly become an extremely custom build, and I think it's just something that you have to be conscious of when you start looking at pricing on any of the cinematography cameras or on any of the mirrorless cameras, any of the DSLRs. If you want to kit that for live production, I mean, you're gonna end up doing a lot to accessorize those cameras and spend quite a bit of money on kitting it out as well. So that's definitely something that you also need to be taking into consideration. So we'll dig right into the 6D here. And you'll have to forgive me, I didn't memorize my outlines, so I'm sorry.
Hey, and that camera's not super focused. I want to show that camera real quick. Can I put it in program and we can try to focus it? Brady, tell them when it's in focus.
Yep.
Keep
back
going.
a little bit. That's good.
A little bit more, AJ. A little bit forward. Other way. Too far.
That's fine.
There
Right
you go.
there.
Right
Yep.
there.
Yeah, so this is what that camera is looking like there. And all of these cameras, we really pretty much just took them out and just essentially white balanced them and set the iris on them. They're the kind of what we wanted to do here was go with the lowest gain setting possible, right? So we went with the lowest gain setting possible, and then if they had shutters, we set them appropriately, and then kind of then irised for light there. But yeah, so that's what we're getting out of the 7D, or I'm sorry, the 60 Mark II right now. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's clearly it's a good looking camera. I mean, it's got great color reproduction. Canon's always had. Oh, I kicked the tripod. Sorry, this is what happens when we have a cheaper tripod. Sorry, we have more expensive tripods here, but we didn't put this camera on that one. So anyway, Canon's always been great at their color science. You know, I think that's what a lot of people like about Canon, and why a lot of people choose to shoot Canon is because their colors are always great. They're always rich, and like I said, we didn't do much to make this look good. We are currently shooting it with a 24 by 105 millimeter lens. So we'll that's the focus. See, shows you how much I know about DSLR cameras. So this is the focal length on that lens. So this is full wide, and that is full tight. That's 105 millimeters on this camera, and that's at about, what do we say, 22
feet.
22 feet. And that chart is about 24 inches long, 24 inches tall. So anyway, we're going to dig into that here shortly as far as sensor size, crop factor, everything like that. So this is this camera is about a $1,200 camera without the lens. That's just the body, and then it's a 28.6 megapixels. It shoots full HD video at 59.94. The HDMI output on the side is a mini HDMI. We are feeding a Decimator MDHX. This is obviously a great photography camera. It is a full frame camera, so it is the sensor is relatively the same size as 35 millimeter film. That's what full frame means, is that the sensor is the same size as film. So that's whenever you hear people talk about full frame or crop factor or something like that, that's essentially what they're talking about. This is a full frame camera. This is a full frame sensor, and so it does not have a crop factor. So that means that when we shoot 24 to 105 millimeter, we're going to see that full 105 millimeter. Now I am going to switch this lens here in a second over to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, and you'll see essentially what I think it's a 1.5 crop factor looks like. Once I flip to that page on my notes, I'll remember. So this obviously, if you own a 6D like we did, that's the reason we put it out here. We owned it, and it is capable of shooting 1080p video. If you're looking for a versatile Canon camera, and you want to be able to shoot video and photography, I would probably start looking at like the EOS R. Or the Canon 1DX Mark III, and then you can also get into their cinema camera line, which is the C100 Mark II, C300 Mark II, and the C500 Mark II, which are all phenomenal looking cinema cameras. And this one we just showed more or less to kind of show what a 24 by 105 looks like on a full frame sensor. So Nick, we'll switch over to you while I switch this lens out.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, another reminder, tonight's show is going to cover all of the, if you're just tuning in with us, tonight's show, it covers all types of cameras. So we have a PTZ camera. We just went over the DSLR. Next up is going to be a small size cinema camera. Following the small size cinema camera, we're going to go to one of the full size cinema cameras, a broadcast. We have 2 broadcast cameras, and a camcorder as well. So we kind of have this all covered tonight. Again, too, we're also doing a Lavo swag pack giveaway. To be eligible to win that, you have to like us on Facebook at the facebook.com/Pro Production Podcast, as well as share this video. And if you would be so kind, this wasn't in the requirements, but head over to the YouTube page as well and like or subscribe to us on YouTube. Once we get to 100 subscribers, then we'll be able to create the permalink for our YouTube page, so we can tell you to actually go to our YouTube page /something versus just me telling you to go to the YouTube page. So, but higher quality over at the YouTube page as well. We're taking
Definitely
your questions.
higher quality.
We're taking your questions in chat, both on Facebook as well as on YouTube too. I'm checking these out over here. And then we're also taking your questions at 317-586-2844 is the phone number you can call into. Again, 317-586-2844. We'll be taking those questions as well. So I think the guys are ready to head back to them. We're going to be going over the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera now. So AJ, tell us about the Pocket Cinema camera.
Yeah, so this is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, specifically the 6K. They also have a 4K variant of this camera, and we can go ahead and put the picture in program while I'm talking about it. The as you can see, this camera is going to have a much tighter field of view than the full frame, and it's the exact same lens. We're zoomed all the way into 105 millimeter. The reason it is a tighter frame is because the sensor is smaller, so there's a crop factor on this sensor, and it is this particular camera is a Super 35 sensor, which means that that's pretty much a cinematography size sensor. So it's a 1.5 crop factor. So multiply 105 millimeter by 1.5, and that tells you your relative focal length of this lens. The other thing to keep in mind is that, like I said, this is the 6K variant. There is also a 4K version of this camera, and that one has about a 1.9 crop factor, and it has an MFT lens, so it's not EF, it's MFT. I believe that's the only two differences between those two cameras. Personally, I really like the 6K because I haven't had the best of luck with MFT lenses. I'm sure that there is someone out there who knows more about lensing options than me, but I know that there is a plethora of EF lenses available, and any EF lens will fit on this Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 6K, not on the 4K. I'm sure that there's an MFT to EF adapter that you can use, but I don't know about it. So I think that is one thing that I do want to mention briefly is, well, yes, there is more versatility when you start to look into some of these handheld form factors. You can kind of reach a point of diminishing returns when you have to start kitting it out and you start comparing it to, some of the other options that are available for seemingly cheaper. One of the cameras we'll get to here in a minute is probably gonna take the cake tonight as my favorite bang for the buck camera. So anyway,
hey AJ,
yeah, go ahead.
Real quick too. We got a question right now.
Yeah.
So we've got a caller come on in. Caller, can you hear me?
Hey, yes, I can hear you.
Hey, what's your name?
This is Simon Roberts.
Oh, hey Simon.
We know you, Simon.
What's up?
Hey, one second, sorry. Let me,
No, you're good.
I've got a remote that loves to turn movies on when I bump it. So I actually have a question for you guys regarding, just because you're talking about sensor size and whatnot. Do you find that, some of the stuff geared more towards cinema, that you have any difficulties with, like real shallow depth of field or anything?
I am not a cinematography shooter, so I know that is a goal of, and again, that's kind of what I was back to saying earlier, where there's going to be a lot about particularly the cinema line of cameras that I don't know, and it's just to be honest, it's just due to a lack of experience with these cameras in particular. I can tell you that there is absolutely a shallower depth of field when you get to the larger sensor on the cameras, and that can definitely be a desirable result in the cinematography world, just because it gets that really good looking bokeh on the background, so you can really focus on your subject. And I know that is a very desirable result right now in specifically, I will say, the concert and church production world. The VariCam's a great, we'll get to the VariCam here in a second, but it's a great looking camera, and that is a very desirable result and I would say the concert and the live production world. Obviously, it's not going to translate very well to the sports broadcast world. You're not going to want those slim depth of field margins that you're dealing with cinematography cameras in sports broadcasting, because essentially the ball would be in a different focus plane than the player.
I think too, another thing to keep in mind and to be really careful of too is if you're using inexperienced camera operators, I think people already have enough trouble pulling focus just with standard broadcast cameras or camcorders.
I was about to bring that
especially
up,
as
we won't mention any names, but we do know of a very large church who uses some fabulous looking Red cameras, they all look very phenomenal. And I'm not saying this, if I'm understanding their workflow correctly, they do have remote focus pullers on every single one of their cameras. So they have similar to having a separate shading position, they also have a separate focus position, which again, you're dealing with a very, with
even that's difficult.
Yeah, with a very slim depth of field on those cameras. To answer your question directly, Simon, whenever Nick and I were setting up in the shop, we were actually able to get the depth of field so slim that Nick's nose was in focus while his face was out of focus.
Yep.
So
yeah, I've had that with, even with broadcast cameras, from
if you're on a super telephoto, for sure.
Yep.
And and it's a dark stage. You're wide open with the f-stops. I've definitely had super shallow depth of field, even with like a 2/3 CCD.
Yeah, which it can be accomplished on a 2/3 inch sensor. You just need a super telephoto lens like the DigiPower 55, and and you need a lot of you need a lot of distance as well. You need a lot more physical distance than you on a 2/3 inch sensor than you would need on Super 35 or something like that. And once we dig into the VariCam, we're going to actually and this won't be tonight, this will be in the coming weeks, but once we dig into that camera, we actually have a B4 to PL optical enlarger that we're going to be putting on that camera as well, so we can actually put a standard B4 lens on that camera, and we've actually tested it in that workflow, and it really is kind of the best of both worlds. There's really a lot to like, I think, about that setup if you really want that shallow depth of field.
Yeah. Hey, one of the questions we had here, and also thank you, Simon, for calling in. Thanks for that question. The phone line is open too, folks. 317-586-2844 is the number. One of the questions we had here in chat or in Facebook too was, what cameras are we using to do this with? What were the cameras we're using to actually film this with? Camcorders, right?
AGUX 180s.
AGUX 180s.
Yeah.
Or we're doing this tonight.
We have two Panasonic AGUX 180s because they were available.
Yeah.
And
they're working great.
And because they're good looking cameras. I mean, there's no getting around it. So we're just using camcorders tonight. We have a very nice Miller tripod with a nice dolly on one, and then we have another basic tripod on the other. But however, the Miller is our primary dolly cam, and it looks great. So anyway, that's the camera we're using for filming. So that's the dolly cam right there, so you can see it. So there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can see our program monitor in the corner. So anyway, so as you can see, there was a lot of setup that went into this. So anyway, we'll dig back into the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. So this camera does have a 1.5 times crop factor. There is a couple other things that you can do if you don't have a longer lens on this camera, and you can actually change the shooting to. Let me see if I can remember how to do this now. You can actually change the amount of sensor that the camera is using. So now we can drop this down to a 2.8K use on the sensor, and now we're even tighter. So you can put that up in program, and you can see how much more of the field we're showing here. So and I'll just flip it, leave it up in program, and I'll flip back in the menu right now. So that's 2.8. And then that is 6K.
And just so we're clear, we're not doing any zooming on the lens. The lens is already all the way zoomed. We're using a smaller portion of the sensor.
Correct. So we are only using 2.8K worth of the sensor as opposed to 6K of the sensor. And you can see that, so I do want to talk about that a little bit, because there is a thing that used to be frowned upon, called digital zoom, and it used to be frowned upon because sensors are so much smaller, that were so much smaller back in the day, for the most part, than they are today. You can really get a lot more out of these larger sensors. You can get a lot more usable area, and I would say that the 2.8K crop factor on this camera still looks very good. And if you don't have a long lens and you're working with a long distance, you can definitely shrink that sensor size, and you're only using 2.8K worth of the 6K sensor. So I would have to think about the crop factor, but we'll just say if it's 1.5, you're going to double it. So we'll call
one of the
call
questions
it roughly a 3 times crop factor.
One of the questions we had here too was, do you lose f-stop with the 1.5 times factor?
Oh, no. That's just going to be that. So that's something to keep in mind is that it's digital. So you're not losing f-stop as you go from 6K to 2.8K because you're essentially just using a smaller portion of the sensor. So you're not going to lose any f-stop, but it's not the same as doing like a 2x extender on a broadcast camera, which we'll show that here shortly as well. So yeah, it's definitely not the same as that. So the pros of this camera, it is a great price point. I think let's see if I've got the price point written down. Yeah, I do. So this camera starts at $2,000 and the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, so the smaller one, starts at $1,300, and that is without a lens. That's just out of the box. The lens we have on it, like I said, is the Canon 24 to 105. I don't remember what that costs, but it's a nicer lens. It's a great photography lens. And then it's obviously a versatile camera. You can use it for cinematography. You can use it for live. The other nice thing that Blackmagic released on this camera is that you can control this camera with the A10 Mini and the A10 Mini Pro directly over HDMI. So that's a great feature of this camera for a very small live production setup. You can use the A10 Mini or the A10 Mini Pro, which has 4 HDMI inputs, and then plug. I would probably say you'll wind up plugging 2 or 3 of these cameras into one of those switchers because you also need to have room for computer graphics and things like that usually. So, but yeah, it's and you can do. I believe full control. There's also there's a lot of things you can do with this camera as far as coloring goes with DaVinci. I'm not that great at building LUTs, which is why we did not build any for tonight. So there you go. I would say the cons of this camera are going to be that there's no motorized zoom, at least on the lens that we're using. So everything on here is manual. So in order to zoom the camera, I have to physically reach up and turn the lens. So obviously, if you don't have this mounted with some gear and a follow focus or something to kind of give that some smooth movement, you're most likely not going to have a lot of luck pushing and pulling zoom and or focus live. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if you're thinking about using one of these cameras for a live environment. There is a Canon EF CNE 70-200. I have not tested that lens on this camera, but it is a motorized zoom lens, so it might work. I don't see why it wouldn't because it's an EF lens and it has servo zooms on it, so I would think it would. But if someone has one of those lenses and they want to send it to us, then we'll test it for you. So, and we'll give it back.
Whoa, we just said we'd test it.
Maybe we could ship them the camera. No, we're not going to ship them the camera. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, let's see. I think that's really everything I can think of worth covering these cameras in a live production. Is there anything I'm skipping on the 6D or the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K that you're thinking of, Nick?
No, that sounds great.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Cool. Well, while they switch over to the next camera, again, doing the Lavo Swag Pack giveaway tonight, like our Facebook page, facebook.com/P3, or I'm sorry, not /P3. That would be pretty cool if we had that name. Facebook.com/Pro Production Podcast. That's where you're going to like it, as well as share the stream to win. That's how you win the Lavo Swag Pack tonight. So thanks for Lavo for doing that for us, for putting that together. I don't know all that's in it yet. But I know it's cool, whether it be like jackets, shirts, coffee mugs, pins, backpacks, I don't know. But it's going to be something cool. So definitely make sure you do that as well. Hey, we're back next week at Tuesday. What is the date next week, Brian, do you think? We're back next Tuesday, whenever that's going to be. Different month, so let's look here. Tuesday... Yeah, Tuesday, June 2nd. We're back next week at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to be doing broadcast cameras next week. And we're going to be taking more of an in-depth look at them than we have tonight. Tonight, we're just skimming through all the major camera types. But we're going to be doing Sony FB80, Hitachi HD 5500, and the Blackmagic, the ever so popular Blackmagic URSA broadcast next week as well. So we'll be doing that next week, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Can't wait to do that with you. Phone lines are open, 317-586-2844. We're taking your questions in chat. We've got one right now from Wesley. Wesley said, would you use a Panasonic camcorder if you're using Panasonic PTZ cameras? I'm trying to decide between getting the Canon XF705 and the Panasonic CX350 for our church. I really want the XF705 because it has the 12G SDI output. But no, the Panasonic will match closer to the color science of the PTZ camera. I do not get why Panasonic doesn't make any camcorders with 12G SDI output. Yeah, I think I think that there's some validity to cameras having similar sensors or same manufactured sensors in them.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. So it's actually convenient that the next one we're going to talk about is the CX350. So
look at that.
You go.
It's almost like we planned it.
Yeah, great timing on that question.
Thanks, Wes. We'll send you your check later.
So to answer your question directly, yes, I think it can be a little bit frustrating that there is not a 12G output on this camera. It is only a 3G output. I didn't actually write that down as a con. And the truth is because I truly, for the most part, do not think it is yet what I would consider to be a con. I mean, most of even a 1080p 5994 3G true 1080p 5994 3G workflow is an improvement from where we've been for a long time. I mean, keep in mind that today in 2020, many systems that we're installing are still going to be 1080i 5994, and that's just because that has been the broadcast standard for so long. And Simon, who was just on the phone not too long ago, can also even speak to the concert industry. That majority of what they're doing is still 1.5G, so it's 1080i 5994 or 720p 5994. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is that yes, 12G 4K is very shiny, and but I think if you look at a lot of the side-by-side shots on there's so many great people to follow on YouTube that especially cinematographers, they really talk about the oh shoot, who is that guy? Potato Jet. That's who it is. So anyway, look at Potato Jet's videos. He has a lot of great content on there on 4K versus HD. And I would say that yes, while a 4K workflow can definitely be a desirable workflow if you're able to maintain it, it's not going to be the end all be all. It's not going to be that defining factor that really makes your video look phenomenal. And I think that's something to keep in mind, is that, in general, the broadcast cameras, the sensors, and even some of these other camcorders and other cameras that we're looking at, even passing down a 3G or 1.5G pipe is still going to be a very desirable picture.
I think one thing people really forget about when they're talking, if they want to go 4K cameras or not, is your entire workflow going to be ready for that 12G pipe? Or is your switcher going to be ready for 4K? Is your gen lock going to be ready for 4K? Can you even output 4K with whatever encoder you're using? And is whoever is viewing it at home, or wherever your viewer is, can they even receive it in 4K? Now, there's an argument to be said, if we shoot it in 4K and it gets subbed down, would it look better? But I think there's a lot of extra things people don't talk about when they're wanting to go to a 4K workflow that really puts it out of the price point for most people.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, if you can afford to do a 4K workflow, by no means, there's no reason not to. It's definitely going to be the most forward thinking, or at least having that in mind. To talk to tangent specifically to the Carbonite Ultra that we're using tonight. Everything we're doing tonight is 1080p 5994. Anything that is outputting 4K is getting downscaled before the Carbonite. We're running frame syncs in the Carbonite. So everything we're doing is essentially 1080p 5994, and the Carbonite Ultra is 12G capable. So I think that is definitely something to keep in mind, because I think that as time goes on, just like with all technology, we're going to start to see the cost of 12G come down, and it's going to be far more attainable. I think especially as more as SMT2110 gets more developed and all of those standards get more developed. That's also something to keep in mind, is that cabling as it relates to 12G is gonna be, it's gonna take more of a robust coax cable. In an ideal world, anything 12G, you're just going to be running over fiber, because we've really kind of stretched the limitations of long coax, in my opinion, when we start talking about 12G. So,
Nick, was it Simon we were talking? I think we had this conversation a few weeks ago on the P3 of planning infrastructure out. Was it Simon who we were talking about? Should we start planning for 4K? Do you remember who it was? If you don't, no big deal.
Yeah, no, we talked to Simon about, just planning for 4K. But again, it gets, like we said, it gets very expensive, right? Because, now instead of just converting SDI to HDMI potentially, you're now adding a step of maybe down converting to some devices. So, yeah, I mean, it's just thinking through the pros and cons of that. Obviously, listen, 4K is the next step, right? So,
if it's on your mind and you have the budget,
4K,
start planning for, like the Carbon Eye Ultra, for example, can be easily upgraded to 12G and start using those capabilities. So put that in if you have a new switcher.
I want to say this. It's the next step. However, we know from experience of people that were stuck in high quality standard definition equipment for a long time, that high quality standard definition for a long time looked better than cheap high definition equipment.
Yeah.
So I think that's the point that needs to be made, is that quality is quality. And just because a camera is $2,000 and says 4K certainly does not mean it's better than the 5500 we have sitting over there that's a 1080 camera.
Yeah.
Because that 1080 camera, that's a broadcast grade camera, is going to be better all day long. So
yeah, I definitely think that that's something that we can talk about. The we're not talking about any, at least tonight. Who knows if we'll get into this on the other nights. But we're talking about the differences in every single one of these cameras. It's not really that any one of these cameras are better than another. Every single one of these cameras that we have, at least in this lineup, has its place. It's a camera that we would use. It's a camera that we would recommend, and they're all going to have their place. And I think that that's something to keep in mind. Yes, there can be more desirable features in some than others, but I definitely think that that for the most part, there's not a single camera here that I wouldn't recommend. So. We'll keep digging into the CX350 now. So the price point on this camera is a very desirable price point. It's about $3,700. It is a full camcorder, so it is a everything's built in. There's no removable lens. There's nothing like that. We have this with power supply plugged in. We're running HDSDI out. We also have a Manfrotto link controller on here, which I'll talk about here in a second. This camera is kind of a great balance between cinema and live production. A feature that we are not showing tonight on this camera, but that is available, that really makes it one of the best camcorders for live production, is the ability to plug in an RCP. So there's an Ethernet port on this camera, and I think Scarhoy and even the Panasonic RCPs will control this camera. They'll control the iris on this camera. It also has dual XLR inputs, so it's great for field shooting, great for things like that. There's some features in this camera that's got a lot of selectable gamma modes, HDSD film-like, video rec, HLG or HLog, and then HDR recording as well. And then you can also choose to output the HDR over the 3G SDI or the HDMI independently. Something to think about in camcorders is that the HDMI and the HDMI and the SDI are not always able to be used on every single camcorder. So that is definitely a feature you need to look out for. We have not kitted this camera with a separate viewfinder tonight. We're just using a separate flip-top viewfinder right here. It's not uncommon if you're using this camera in a live production. It's not uncommon to want a larger viewfinder, something that you can put something that you can have focus peaking or something like that on a much larger viewfinder, especially back here behind the camera. And in order to use a larger viewfinder, you'll need the HDMI and the SDI to output simultaneously. So let's see. The other nice thing about this camera, which I haven't dug a lot into, is that this camera does provide 16 axis of color control. So it's going to give you a lot of ability to color match, especially if you have, I don't know specifically which software you can do it in, but I do know that you can build LUTs for this camera, which essentially would allow you to color match other cameras. So I do believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong if they want, but I do believe that the sensor that is in this camera is actually going to be the same sensor that's in the UE150. Do you know anything about that, Brady?
I believe it's the same sensor.
Okay, we heard some rumblings about that. It might be, so don't quote me on that, because it might be a different sensor. But anyway, long story short, they look very great, and they kind of match the UE150 very well. And we might, if we have a chance, we might get a chance to do a quick side by side on those tonight. But I'll keep moving forward for now. So this is a great price for the image quality. Something to keep in mind on this camera is that it is a camcorder, so $3,800 is about kind of as all-inclusive as it gets. Obviously, you're going to need some batteries, you're going to need some SDXC cards, you're going to need or P2 cards, whatever. Does this take a P2 card? Nope.
It takes the Panasonic's proprietary.
Yeah, or the SDXC cards.
Yep.
So yeah, so you'll need some recording media, some things like that. But it, really out of the box, which is very much the way we have this camera, it is going. That's the benefit to a camcorder, is the price range is going to be very desirable, and for the most part, you don't have to budget for too much extra. Like I said, we have a Manfrotto link controller on the back, which I'll show you here in a second. This camera does have a 20x optical zoom, which is also very desirable, and it also has a very clean digital zoom. So we'll show you that
up to 32 with the digital, I believe.
Yeah. I don't remember the relative addition, but I do know it's on there. And then, like I said, RCP control available via Ethernet. So can we switch to this camera and program? Is that an option? I think we actually started to rain here, and Nick, there we go. And Nick drives a Jeep, so his Jeep is definitely getting wet. So
the plugs on the bottom of the Jeep have now been pulled, and it's inside. So yes.
So anyway, I think that rain really came out at the last minute. So anyway, let's switch back to this camera. And so I can show you kind of what a 20x zoom looks like. So this is full wide on that zoom, and then this is tightening in. And then right about here, we're going to reach the limitation of the optical zoom, and I'll tell you when we reach that limitation. So right here is the limitation of the optical zoom, and then we can go a little bit further with digital zoom. So we'll tighten it a little bit more. And now we're all the way in on that chip with a camcorder. So, and I would say it's still a very desirable image. So, like I said, I think this camera pretty much takes the cake, in my opinion, as far as the best bang for the buck. Live production camera, RCP control, all of that stuff is available for this camera. So you can do camera shading and camera color control on this. There is, let's see, so the cons of this camera is that it's actually one of the first cameras Panasonic has done that it's actually standard length as opposed to separate zoom and focus. I don't know yet if I'm the biggest fan of standard length, because I really appreciated some of the VariZoom products that were available that had separate zoom and focus, but we shall definitely see. There's been a few online forums that have been talking about a lack of smooth zoom control on this camera with length control. I would say that either that's been fixed, or maybe we're just using the right zoom controller. Because if you want to switch back to this, Nick, I would say that this is actually a very relatively smooth zoom. So this is not quite as slow as I can go. I could slow down a little bit, and there's also a speed ring, a speed dial on this on this camera, but for the most part, I would say that, it is capable of a rather smooth, and any of that shake is because I'm using a cheaper tripod. But, that's a pretty slow zoom out, so yeah.
And AJ, one of the questions here in chat was, this is camera type, is manufacturer and the camera name again?
Panasonic AGCX350.
Awesome.
Yeah. This does have optical image stabilization as well. That is something I forgot to write down. And then that's something that'll definitely help with handheld shooting. That is a feature that I didn't really talk about too much. That is available. This is actually the first camera we've discussed tonight that has optical image stabilization. Some of the Canon cameras do have do have optical image stabilization, and then one of the newer cameras that Canon announced, the I forget the model number. It's one of the newer mirrorless cameras. It's actually going to be one of their first cameras with in-body image stabilization. So that's going to be a very desirable camera when it comes to handheld shooting. So there is, it's not optical, it's digital image stabilization that's in this camera. So I don't believe the lens has any floating properties to it, but I do believe that it might. I'll have to dig into the manual, but it at least has image stabilization as it relates to the sensor. So it essentially crops in a little bit on the sensor and then stabilizes that way. So at least I believe that to be accurate, but I could be wrong on that.
And again, that's one of the advantages of a larger sensor, right?
Yeah.
Is that you have areas to region of interest and kind of float, which is basically what, image stabilization in post has done for a long time, right? It zooms in and then it gives a little bit of a room to a little bit of a buffer zone to help work that out. But yeah,
so let's actually, Brady, let's go ahead and do a side-by-side wipe. Not we don't have to do the side-by-side, just do the wipe on the switcher of 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
So yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention before we got off of camcorders, AJ, is we get a lot of clients who ask for specifically camcorders because of a possible dual function. Of using it in a room and then taking it off through the week or during something else that they're doing and using it outside of just live production and maybe just recording some or shooting some promo videos in another room. I'll let you speak to it a little bit as well. I think that definitely can be done. I would say you want to limit the wear and tear on your camera, and you want to make sure all of your settings get back to what they were in the room, and that's something we see people forget often, is making sure the camera is set up properly back into the room, because these camcorders do have that nice function. You can take it off, you can throw it, you can use it outside or in another room for promo for a kids camp or something. But getting the settings back to your when you're put in the room is really important and something you really don't want to forget.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, like I said, if it was me and my money, and again, I admittedly do not have a lot of experience in the cinematography world, so it's something that I'm sure someone can correct me on. But if it was me and my money, and I wanted a run and gun video camera, I would be looking at like a broadcast ENG style shoulder mount camera or a camcorder, because I think there's some security, I think, in this design for me, just knowing that I can pick it up, turn it on, hit record, and it's going to do what I want. There's definitely, I think, a security factor there. And then also like we're showing, it can be used in live production, or you can pop it off the tripod and take it out, use it for remote shooting or whatever it might be. And like I said, this is a little bit of a hybrid camera, because it is a larger sensor. It is going to have a little bit of a shallower depth of field than some of your standard 2/3 inch or 1/2 inch camcorders. So this is a larger sensor. We won't be able to do any depth of field tests tonight, but we might try to do that in some of the coming weeks. But yeah, I would definitely say that there's a lot of desirable features of this camcorder. As far as settings go, you can actually store scenes in this camera, so you can easily recall, your in-room scene versus your field or whatever it might be that you might want to take this camera out for.
Yeah, that's perfect timing. Tom just asked in chat, what are the scene file saving capabilities of each of these cameras? So there are ways to save the files to SD cards and to transfer them to other cameras, which is really neat as well. Well,
at least same camera to same camera.
Yes,
you can't like transfer like a Panasonic camera to
Correct.
a Canon camera. That's not going to work.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So a couple questions here in chat too. Someone has said, will it do iMag? Yeah, it will do iMag. That camera specifically does not accept Genlock in though, right?
No, does it?
Does it? I don't know if it does or not.
I don't believe it
I think
does.
I don't know.
Time code. It's not Genlock. So there's an issue with iMag is that you will have to use a frame sync on your switcher, which will add a bit of latency, but it will do iMag.
I would say for the most part, I would genuinely say that for the most part, passing through a frame sync has become far less issue than it used to be. We're talking about just
minimum of a frame.
Yeah, very minimal latency noticed.
Yeah.
And in general, this is the first camera we've discussed tonight that does have a native SDI output.
Yeah.
So that means that there is not any conversion that has to happen coming out of this camera into your switcher. So of all the cameras we've looked at tonight, I would say that for the most part in a live production environment, this camera, and we'll move on to the other ones here in a second, but this is the first camera we've discussed tonight that, like I said, is just built, I would say more purpose-built for a live production environment. So it's going to have the lowest amount of latency because we didn't have to pass through a decimator or anything like that to get the picture back to the switcher. So
another question we had here too was if you can, AJ, as we go through these, can you mention how maybe intuitive these are for beginners? Because I think that's something that a lot of our viewers want to know is how easy is this for someone just to pick up. But let's go through that. But real quick, let's go to the side-by-side. We've got that set up now. Can you explain to us what we're seeing on the side-by-side? What's on the left one?
So
right?
because we can, someone asked, and these could probably be matched a little bit closer. Let me just iris down a smidge because I think we're primarily only there's a slight color difference. So what we are seeing right now is the side-by-side of the Panasonic, the AG CX350, and then the
This is the UE 150.
and then
UE 150.
the AG UE 150. So the PTZ camera. So
the PT's on the right, right?
PTZ's on the right.
Yep.
And,
And
the,
then
the 350's on the left.
Camcorders
So
on the
you have
left.
3 and 4.
Okay.
So we're essentially looking at like I said, one of my favorite PTZ cameras right now, and we're not going to dig into this one super deep because we got it set up at kind of the last minute, and I didn't get a chance to make an outline on it. So anyway, but all that to say, it's definitely one of the best looking PTZs I've ever seen. Very crisp image, dual output, so you can actually have a standard 4K output, which is scaled down to 1080p, and then you can do a separate output, which is a crop factor output. So this camera essentially has a 2x crop factor, so you can do a tight and a wide follow in one camera, which I think is a very powerful feature. Which I think is a very powerful feature of 4K that we didn't talk about too much when we started talking about 4K. But essentially, I think that's where 4K is really going to shine, is when you start talking about the ability to reframe your camera. And that's something that this camera does very well that we'll dig much deeper into in the coming weeks. We'll probably have to spend like an entire evening just comparing this camera to other cameras because there's so many great things about it as it relates to PTZ. And while we're on PTZ, I do want to talk very briefly about this controller. So I'm going to stand up and move out of the way here. But
you move directly in
I
the way
moved
of the camera.
directly in the way. So this is the Panasonic AWR-P 150. This is definitely by far one of the best PTZ controllers that I've ever used. It's the first Panasonic controller that actually has some zoom on the back of this as well, so you can do single-handed operation if that's a desirable workflow. You can also have a separate zoom control over here, a separate focus, nice, very reachable autofocus button, and then just a quick instant autofocus. Iris control is right here. There's a lot of preset memories in this. Well, the presets are stored in the camera, but there's also TMEMs, as Panasonic calls it, so you can do programmed moves in this camera as well. It's not quite like a keyframe move if you're familiar with that, but it is something that you can record your movement and then play it back. So that can definitely be a desirable feature. But in
one thing
general-
about it, you can also do up to 200 cameras controlled per the controller, and that's over LAN, and then you can store up to 100 presets per camera.
Per camera, yeah.
So you have a lot of flexibility, and if you get over 200 cameras on one of these things, let us know.
I want to be the guy that has to control 200 PTZ
cameras from one.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's
multiple cameras can be controlled
Man.
by multiple different controllers as well.
But
So if
as-
you're huge
Yeah.
production, you can do multiple cameras to multiple controllers.
So as it relates to PTZ, and again, this is not necessarily a price point for the faint at heart, and I apologize for that. But what can I say? If you really want a great PTZ workflow, then it's definitely where I would start. I think that the camera starts at about 10 grand, but like I said, that's kind of justifiable because you can almost justify it as two cameras because
I think you can definitely justify it as two cameras. In every production we talk about, we want two center cams.
Yeah.
We want two right up the middle, so you have your tight, you have your wide, and this camera can do both of those shots out of one camera. So I think you can definitely justify two cameras for $10,000.
We'll definitely be excited to show you guys that in the coming weeks. The issue, like I said, was tonight that we ran out of inputs, so that's why.
We are getting lots of comments in chat about the tight and the wide. So yes, essentially it is a 4K sensor in a camera, so you can have your wide, which would be utilizing the full 4K frame.
I think for the sake of relevance, Nick, we'll plan on talking about that at least
next
early
week.
as next week.
So we'll do this big game changer here, folks. We'll do the PTZ camera along with the FB80. So we'll do PTZ. We'll look at that PTZ camera with the other broadcast cameras. So URSA broadcast, the 5500 from Hitachi, and then the FB80 from Sony as well.
And we'll probably leave the 350 in just as a camcorder reference, just so you can have that as well. But yeah,
another mega camera stream next week. So make sure if you're on YouTube right now, you hit the subscribe button, please. And if you're on Facebook, make sure you like P3 as well. That'll allow you to get updates about when we're going to go live again. So which will be next Tuesday. So
yeah, there you go.
Stay tuned for
So
that.
anyway, I definitely think, like I said, one of the best PTZ controllers I've ever had the pleasure of using, and one of the smoothest PTZ cameras I've also ever had the pleasure of using. So, just very small and precise movements are possible with this camera, and we can show that here quickly. I'll just kind of pan around.
And this is on a.
Let me turn that speed down. That'll be a little bit smoother.
This is on a. On a Manfrotto. If we could get that, Nate, to show what this is on right now, the camera, the tripod for the camera.
It's not on a Manfrotto. It's on a Triad.
It's on a Triad Orbit.
Triad. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's on a Manfrotto. Sorry, it is on a Triad Orbit
Mic stand, actually.
Mic stand. So the fact that
Triad Orbit universal stand is what we'll call it.
Universal stands,
because you can mount anything on these suckers, and they are just beefy stands. And feel free to judge our cardboard shims. But yeah, once I got it going there, you can kind of see that it is very capable of some nice smooth movement.
Yeah, and so a lot of the movement we're seeing, the shake, I mean, probably due to the stand, but it's, as I cut back to this camera here, just to look at how well it pans, it looks great. So again,
and I don't even think we're zoomed all the way in on this.
No, we're not.
So yeah,
you can get almost to the center chip zoomed all the way in.
But yeah, so
so that's all the way in.
The wide shot is taking advantage of the
4K sensor.
The 4K sensor, and then the tight shot is a region of interest, right? So it zooms in using the region of interest, which is giving you some more zoom there. It has two separate outputs. That camera also accepts Genlock input. So
yeah. So again, that's the AWRP 150, and the camera is the
AGUE 150.
Yeah, and one other great thing about this camera is it is powered with PoE++. Well, it's not standard PoE. It is a form of PoE. So
which is great because an install or a tight area, you don't need to do a power supply. You can just run it over your standard Ethernet.
So you essentially need
Cat 5e.
2 SDI cables, a Genlock cable if you're running Genlock to your cameras, which you should be, and a PoE, a Cat 6 cable. So then everything on that camera is taken care of, and you get two outputs. So no wall warts stuck in a ceiling or anything like that. Nope. So anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick here, let me remind you, we're doing the Lavo giveaway tonight, the Lavo swag pack giveaway. You just have to like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Pro Production Podcast, as well as share this stream. We're enjoying hanging out with you tonight. We're taking your questions via chat and on our YouTube page and our Facebook page as well. And if you're over there on the YouTube page, that link's in the Facebook, it's pinned. But if you're over there on the YouTube page, make sure you press subscribe. That way it can actually give you a link to go to from now on. But I just realized that I hadn't scrolled down all the way. But it's great hanging out with you guys, with everyone tonight. We're having a blast, and we've been away for a while as we've been preparing for this stream. But we're really excited to do it tonight, as well in the future. Next week, we'll be doing more broadcast cameras too. So we're having a lot of fun with you, showing off these cameras. So AJ, what do we have? What do we have next?
We have the highly
This is exciting, guys.
anticipated, and for some of us, highly controversial.
Heyo.
Highly controversial Blackmagic URSA broadcast.
And we now own this camera too. So this is ours. This is not a demo.
Yep. So anyway, this is the Blackmagic URSA broadcast. And I have to admit, this is one of the first cameras that, in my opinion, Blackmagic really checked a lot of boxes on. This is one of the first cameras that they have. Wait, which camera am I blocking here? Sorry, Nick. This is one of the first cameras that they have that is a somewhat native B4 mount, meaning that you can mount. Well, it is a native B4 mount. It is not a native B4 sensor because it's not a 2/3 inch sensor. But there is an optical enlarger so that the 2/3 inch lens occupies the entire sensor. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Is that this is one of the best truly broadcast ready cameras that Blackmagic has put together. There are a lot of things to like about this camera. It's got right now we have a let's see, a Fuji 8.5 to 170 millimeter lens with a 2x extender on it. We have the fiber back on the camera. We have the viewfinder on the camera, and then we are running everything with this camera over SMPTE fiber. So everything is a single cable solution. So that is something I do want to take a quick tangent on and talk about, is that as we get more into these cameras, we're going to be talking about SMPTE fiber a lot. So if you're not familiar with what that is, there used to be a thing called Triax. Now there's a thing called SMPTE fiber. So SMPTE fiber is essentially and I'm not going to unplug it because we actually have had a few issues getting this camera to resync on a regular basis, plugging it in. But otherwise, I would unplug it and show you. Maybe we'll show that on one of the next ones. And that's good. You can see our fiber optic cleaner right there. That's very important to own when you have SMPTE fiber. Leave it out, Brady.
I like how we left that out there.
Yeah, because we had to clean
very
the fiber.
Important to make sure you have that.
Yeah,
with
very
all
important to make sure your fiber connections are clean. We'll dig deeper into SMPTE fiber probably in one of the coming videos to really kind of talk about just nothing but the major benefits of it. So everything on this camera is one cable to the camera. So this camera is designed to plug in and be ready to go. Everything is powered off from this one cable. It's sending power and video and everything else. So that is something to talk about really quick, is the video transport. Most SMPTE fiber systems like the Multidyne and the Hitachi are going to use typically some form of wave division multiplexing to get all of that data down the fiber. That's something that is different about the URSA broadcast. It is actually using TECO 4:1 compression ratio to get all of that information down a 10G data Ethernet pipe. So this is essentially being converted from full 12G down to 3G using TECO compression, meaning that it's visually lossless, and then it's going to travel to the CCU and then output 12G again back at the CCU. So that is something that's a little bit different from a standard broadcast camera, but I would say that even given the conversions of running through the SMPTE fiber back, latency is negligible. It's definitely something that I would say is imperceivable to me, and I'm pretty sensitive to those sorts of things. So I would say that the latency is negligible, even though it is converting, even though it is using TIGO 4:1 compression to do all of that conversion.
And if you're not understanding what AJ is talking about, like maybe some people here, I don't know who.
That would be me. I have no idea what he just said.
Yeah, so you're not alone. Real quick, AJ, I hate to do this, but can we stop for a second and talk, because we had a message here. We use these words, we've used RCP, CCU. Can we talk real quick what an RCP and a CCU is and what a fiber back is? Because I think that's confusing to people. I oftentimes hear people refer to the RCP as a CCU. And I just wanted to talk through real quick, like, when you're talking about fiber back, CCU, and RCP, what actually are we talking about?
Nate, let's start here at the fiber back. So this is the fiber back. So this is an add-on to the camera that essentially, and most broadcast cameras are going to have an add-on. I'm not going to take this camera apart because it would be a pain to put back together.
It was a pain to put it together.
However, this is the fiber back. So this is a separate piece, and I'll spend a little bit more time on this camera before we break apart because I think it's relevant to what I'm talking about right now. But to talk about this camera, the way we have it fully kitted out, not including the tripod or anything else that it's sitting on tonight, is a $22,500 setup. So it is not a camera for the faint of heart. And I think that that's something that you have to keep in mind again about broadcast cameras, is you're talking about getting into this world where the body is separate from the fiber back, which is separate from the viewfinder, which is separate from the lens, which is separate from the lens controls, which is separate from everything else. So fully kitted out, this camera is $22,500. And I think that that's really where this camera starts to shine, is fully kitted out, because it is still at a price point. It is still at a price point that is cheaper than, a Hitachi 5500 or even a fully kitted out VariCam or something like that. But I would definitely say that one of the cons of this camera has, and we've got it looking pretty reasonable tonight, but I would say one of the biggest cons we've discovered for this camera is low light. We're running at an f1.8 tonight. We're running this iris full open with 0 dB of gain. You can start to add gain, and it does. It does look okay, but it does start to add a little bit of noise.
How much is the lens that we're running on the camera? Because I think that's important. Did we itemize that out?
I don't think I wrote that down, but I can tell you that the body, I'll tell you that the body plus the lens, is $13,300. So this kit with the Fuji 8.5 to 170 with a 2x extender, just this portion right here, just these two units right here, is $13,300. So
not including the fiber back,
right? So then the viewfinder,
make sure
then the viewfinder is $1,800. Then the fiber back is $3,000, and then we'll pan over here to the CCU and we'll talk about the other CCUs we're running. So this is an actual CCU. It's short for camera control unit. So this is the URSA broadcast CCU. This is our Hitachi CCU. This is the multi-dyne CCU for the VariCam. This is a third-party CCU that is actually designed. Multi-dyne can actually make a lot of great CCUs for lots of cameras, but it's definitely something something we'll talk about here in a second once we dig into the multi-dyne.
And that's because that's because they don't make for the Panasonic. I want to be very clear about that, why we're using a third party, but keep going.
Yeah, because Panasonic doesn't make one.
Right.
So anyway, so this is, and at that, I haven't tested this, but it is something that might be worth discussing as to whether or not the URSA broadcast CCU can be used. I mean, it technically can, because it's just 3G and COM and everything else. So the biggest benefit to a CCU is going to be a single cable solution to your camera. This is one cable. This is handling power and 2 strands of fiber, and all of that is passing out of here to that camera, and then that's handling tally, intercom, really everything like that. So it is definitely a desirable setup, because we've got 2 channels of intercom on this camera, we've got tally available on this camera, we've got miscellaneous return video available on this camera, we've got a lot of plethora of I/O available all on this fiber back. So you can see all the ports that are available, and all of this is interfaced directly to the CCU. And that's not just for the Blackmagic URSA broadcast. The same thing is going to be said about the Hitachi 5500 and the Panasonic VariCam. So all of those things are great features to have. So
one thing we didn't talk about in price is the cable itself.
Yeah, I do have that. I do have that written down. SMPTE fiber
Perfect.
cable, $1,000.
And that's just the cable.
Yeah.
If you want to do some sort of back boxing, or if you're putting this in an actual true installation piece, you're not just talking a single cable. You're talking the cable. You're talking connectors into a wall box or a floor box. You're talking all the fiber cable to get to it and the connectors. Call it roughly now
$2,000. The only nice thing about SMPTE cables is they don't get much more expensive depending on how long you get them, because the
length doesn't really matter.
The connectors are the most expensive part. So
recently, I priced out a 164 foot versus about a 50 foot, and I think there's about $100 difference.
Yeah, they're about the same price. So anyway, so you get to that point that it's about $1,000+ So anyway, so that's a SMPTE cable. They're obviously not cheap, but they're very robust. They're built to be ran over with the vehicles. They're built to be reliable, and they're just all around workhorses of cables. So let's keep moving on through this camera. So let's see. So like I said, we have a Fuji. Oh yeah, RCPs. We did skip that. Let's see. We have the Hitachi RCP there. So camera remote control panel is essentially what RCP stands for. This is the Hitachi RCP. This is the VariCam RCP. So this is very desirable, and we'll dig into this a little bit deeper on some of the coming streams. But it's essentially going to give you an operator position for shading control, for operating your iris and things like that. So it's definitely a very desirable feature on a camera, especially in live production, where you might have a lot of dynamic range that you need to cover with the cameras. So that's something to keep in mind. And then this is the Blackmagic URSA Broadcast RCP. We do not have this one hooked up tonight. We actually had to loan our switcher out. That is something to keep in mind, that the switcher, a switcher is required to run this RCP for the URSA broadcast, and we are running a Carbonite Ultra tonight, and we actually had to loan out our Blackmagic switcher, so the one we had on the shelf. So anyway, that's dark, but we'll definitely show that, I think, in the coming weeks.
People are loving, by the way, that we're explaining CCUs and RCPs. It's one of the most common things I hear is that someone will say, hey, adjust the CCU. So yeah, RCP is control panel, remote control panel, really easy to remember. And then CCU is just it essentially is powering the camera and then doing all of the signal transport on this empty fiber. So
I think that's one thing I had to learn getting into when I started doing what we do is very quickly. I learned 3 acronyms: RCP, CCU, and people use them in the same sentence multiple times, and you're trying to figure out what they're talking about.
For the most part, people understand what you say, but the correct terms are that. Do we want to see? Has the time come, AJ, to see the camera?
Yeah. Let's show it.
Are we ready to show it?
Yeah, let's show it.
Oh, hold on.
All right. Make sure we switch to the right camera.
We don't have the lens controls on this, so you will see me reaching up here to control this lens. That's not necessarily indicative of what you would have in a live environment. You would have true lens control on the back of the camera here on the pan arms. You would have true zoom and focus control available on this lens. So that is something that we did not go through the trouble of hooking up.
And
tonight.
AJ, as we do this, the suspense is killing everyone right now. As we do this, I want to make sure to, if we can roll maybe through the white balance a little bit. The auto white balance we're having trouble with, I think a little bit earlier. So roll through the white balance. But here I'm going to show the camera. So
hold on, I gotta reach over for the white balance button. I think it's right there.
It's all the way back towards you on the switch closest toward you. So here is the camera right here. This is the Blackmagic URSA broadcast. This has the Hitachi. The Fujinon lens on it.
8.5 to 170 millimeter.
And that lens, by the way, MSRP is $7,800, I think we said.
I think it's actually, is this the lens that it's... No, it's got to be more because... It's got to be more because...
No, we said 78 here. Research department, this guy right here is telling me $7,800. So,
okay.
At least I hope
I feel like it's more with the 2x extender.
I hope the research department's right. But so $7,800. So there's the camera right there. Now, I think one of the things that people might say is that, so the whites look white. Brady, I don't know if we can switch between this and the camcorder, but
yeah, can definitely do that.
Just
do you want to wipe or do you want to switch?
Just do a half by half wipe.
Okay, do a half by half wipe.
And you want it with the camcorder,
correct? The 350.
So right now you have your camcorder on the left and your Blackmagic.
So AJ, the whites might be a little bit blue, so maybe we...
Oh, these lenses are so fast.
The whites might be a little bit blue, so then maybe we bring the white balance up a touch.
It's got some green in it as well. We're going to have to spend... I'm not going to probably spend a lot of time coloring
Sure.
this camera tonight.
No, I
We'll
just
get the
wanted to
tech
kind of
out and-
rotate through the white balance here. Just to, I think what we were
That's also something. Do you see the rolling lines in that, Nick?
Oh no, I don't. I think one
I
thing.
think that's from the. I think that's from the shop fluorescence.
Oh, let me turn the fluorescence off. So that's all the way down. So one thing that we were noticing as we were rolling through this camera is just that we were having trouble getting, I think, the colors kind of balanced. I think we saw that we were getting more of a yellow and a green out of the camera than we were with some of the other cameras.
And like I said, this is not going to be a great representation of this camera tonight because you can go in and build LUTs for this
Yes.
camera. I have not done that yet. Admittedly, I've not done that yet. There may be a way to make this camera look better and make it look more color accurate. As like I said, pretty much every single one of these cameras tonight was out of the box. We didn't build LUTs. We didn't do a lot of coloring. We will do that in upcoming nights. We have a nice Tektronix back there that has a double diamond that we can do some color matching with and see how close we can get them in kind of a run and gun type environment. We probably won't get into building LUTs because I don't know anything about that, and that's why. So unless someone else does and wants to.
We were one of the things we're really excited about too, AJ. Before we move on here, is as we point out some things that can be better about the camera. One of the things that we loved so much was the viewfinder, right?
Yeah. So we'll definitely talk about the viewfinder here in a second. But I would definitely say that I think that's where this camera really shines. Like I said, is when you really need to get when you really need a camera that is fully kitted out, that doesn't quite cost as much as some of the other broadcast options available. And I think that it's important to keep in mind that when you're using this camera, ideally you're using a lot of this camera, at which point you're not going to be attempting to match it to other cameras. You're going to have great ambient light control. So that's something to keep in mind, is that like I said, it does take a little bit more ambient light to make this camera I think really, really pop. So one of our favorite features about this camera is definitely the viewfinder. The viewfinder is a very ergonomic viewfinder. It's got a lot of adjustment points. It's got a lot of adjustment points on it, and you can. I'm gonna break something because it's on such a cheap tripod if I do too much tonight. But let me just loosen that one. So yeah, so you can move the viewfinder up, move the viewfinder down. You can really put it in a more ergonomic position, especially if you're operating high. Especially if you're operating at a very high.
If the
on a
camera's
very high tripod. Sorry, yeah. If you're operating very high, let's not go there. My bad. Anyway, I can only do so many things, and apparently I can't adjust a viewfinder while talking. So
that's fair. Hey, if you're just joining us, by the way, right now we're talking through cameras. So far, we've talked through DSLRs, we've talked through a mini cinema camera, a pocket cinema camera, gone through a camcorder. Right now, we're on our 4th of 7. Oh, we did the PTZ a little bit too. Right now, we're on our 5th of 7 cameras. So we have the big 2 left and up and coming, which are the Panasonic VariCam as well as the Hitachi 5500 with the Digipower on it. Hey, we're doing 2 tonight. We are doing the Lavo swag giveaway. It's going to be the end of the show, so make sure you stay tuned until then. All you have to do to be eligible to win that is to like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Pro Production Podcast, as well as share this video. So we are cameras 5 of 7 through, and we're really excited to kind of move on. We're also taking your questions via chat on YouTube and on Facebook, so we're monitoring that as well. Ask your questions in there, and we're taking your phone calls too. 317-586-2844 is the phone number you can call in, and it's great to be with you. Great to be talking with cameras with you tonight. We're looking forward to next week where we will be talking about broadcast cameras, along with some PTZ cameras, and we're going to go into more specifics with the URSA broadcast and the FB80 as well as the HD5500 with more PTZ cameras too. So
yeah, and I definitely think that's something to talk about. So and then the viewfinder rotates this way. We missed that part. So it rotates a lot of direction. We
love the viewfinder.
There is also focus peaking, and like I said, there is a lot of really great features on this camera. But I do think it is worth mentioning that we are going to spend more time trying to get a much more desirable picture out of this camera, because there we go. I got to get the viewfinder out of the way for the VariCam. But yeah, I would say keep that in mind. Where this camera really shines is when it's fully kitted out. When it's kitted out like a broadcast camera. If if you don't need the long B4 lenses, if you don't need all those features, then then I think there are other options out there at better price points that that can get you some very desirable results. So I definitely think that that's something to keep in mind. We will move on now to the.
Are we ready to go? The VariCam on our Ross Carbonite Ultra. This switcher has been phenomenal, by the way, that we've been using the Ross Carbonite Ultra with the panel. It's been bringing in all of our cameras tonight and really awesome buttons. I'll throw that out there for our director of engineering, Alex Moon. He loves the buttons.
It is doing a lot less than it can. That's for sure.
True.
The panel might be a slightly overkill.
No, it's making it easier.
It's not really.
We actually had it
we're
set
using
up.
a lot.
We had it set up with a lot of side-by-sides and a lot of quad views that we won't get to tonight because it's not really prevalent to everything we're talking about tonight, but it's definitely something to talk about. As we get more cameras side by side, we'll be able to do quad views and things like that. And that the switcher definitely makes it very easy, especially with the control panel and the scene recalls and all the DVE features and the keying and everything like that. It's a very intuitive switcher to use. So let's dig into the VariCam. So this is the Panasonic VariCam LT. This one right here, not this one. This one.
Do you mean the one that says VariCam?
Yeah, the one that says VariCam.
Oh, crazy.
We're losing a little bit of depth. So we do have this camera fitted with a multi-dyne silverback SMPTE fiber back, and then this all runs to a CCU. This single cable right here, just one cable, is providing power to the camera, power to the lens, power to everything on here. It also has DTAP outputs, so that's something that's also very nice about this setup. The VariCam has a single, I think 1 or 2 DTAP outputs, at least one I know, and then the multi-dyne also has 1, 2, like 4, I think, DTAP outputs. So DTAP is a 12-volt output that is standard in the cinematography world and in the broadcast world. So if you need accessory power, for example, we do not have an external viewfinder mounted to this. We're using this is technically not even a viewfinder. It's more just the menu screen that you can happen to put a picture on. But we will be mounting a larger viewfinder to this in the coming nights. And then we do have a Cabrio 85 to 300 millimeter PL lens mounted to this. It is a very nice lens. I think we've got that written down as well. So let me go over this camera really quick. So price point on the VariCam LT is actually a pretty good price for the body. It's only a $10,000 body, and there was a recent price drop in the VariCam LT body.
As of right now, that's being considered a promo by Panasonic.
Oh, okay.
So that does have an end date. I don't have the end date off the top of my head, but I know right now it's considered a instant rebate down to the $995 price.
The Fujinon Cabrio lens is $32,000. Lens controls are about $5,000 for the particular controls we're running, and we'll get those in a shot here in a second. But they're about, I need to move the viewfinder, this very lovely viewfinder. I need to move it out of the way. Just move around here, Nate. So anyway, this is a very nice lens control. It is servo zoom and a servo focus. And they're just very smooth, very elegant controls.
And it should be mentioned that we have them positioned like that just for the compactness of the cameras.
Yeah, we're not working with a lot of space. You would not typically mount. I mean, I don't know. I could probably get used to this, but you would not typically mount them on a single pan handle. You would mount them on 2 pan bars, and then you would have separate. You would have your focus control on the left and the zoom control on the right if you're normal. Does anyone switch that? I made a joke.
I've never seen
if you're normal, right?
Anybody switch that.
I did see someone the other day that had it switched, and I couldn't. I was almost having to cross my hands.
Did you punch him?
No.
Is that the same as left-handed drummers? Like, they're not really out there. That's just more of a myth, right?
Yeah, it was very difficult to get used to. I ended up switching.
There's no getting used to that. But it's like, I mean, there's no getting used to that. I would just no, I wouldn't be able to. I would switch them. So anyway, zoom on right, focus on left. So anyway, so the lens is $32,000. Lens control is $5,000. Multi-dyne silverback fiber system. The way we have it kitted out, there are different options available for this. The way this one is kitted out is about a $22,000 system. So plus a $1,000 SMPTE fiber cable at least. So all in all, this system is about a $71,000 system as it sits. So like I said, it's not necessarily for the faint at heart, and you can you can absolutely do less with this camera. I think that it was important to us to kind of show it as it relates to what we would consider to be a true live production environment. And in that environment, you want one cable, you want your intercom headset to plug into the multi-dyne, which it does. You want power options available for viewfinders. There's a lot of things that you want in a live environment to really make it just reliable and quick to set up. You know, we are also running the RCP to this camera via Ethernet, so that there is an Ethernet tunnel in this multi-dyne as well. And I didn't have a black cable handy, so that's why it's blue.
Yeah. Looks terrible.
AJ, can you talk to the crop factor on this?
Yeah, I've got
it's a Super 35.
So it is a Super 35. So that would be, what did I say, 1.5, I think? I think I wrote it down on a few pages earlier. I think it's a 1.5 by crop factor on this. So we will dig into the weeds a little bit more on this camera. Like I said, we have a PL to B4 optical and larger that we have available that we're going to be putting on this as well to really show the power of this camera, even mounting it on the Digipower 55 or some other lens, because that is something to keep in mind. So if we want to switch over to this camera really quick, we're going to talk about the zoom available on the Cabrio. Whoa, did we lose our zoom control?
I might have accidentally disabled it earlier when I was working on it. Yeah, flip the servo switch there. That's the focus. There's maybe the zoom.
There we go. All right.
Look at that. You're going to have to focus up, but yeah.
So this is definitely something that we need to talk about is when you're dealing with a PL lens and you're dealing with a Super 35 sensor and a 1.5 crop factor, you're not going to get the zoom, you're not going to get that length that you would get on a 2/3 inch lens or something like that. So you can't just look at this Cabrio PL, which is a great lens, and say, oh, it's 300 millimeters, and this other lens is also 300 millimeters, and that's going to be enough. So this is full wide, and this is full tight. And let me focus that in a little bit. And as you can see, we're not dealing with a lot of range here, and that's 85 to 300. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And like I said, I think that's it. That's as wide as it goes, and that is as tight as it goes. So this is obviously a very cinematic lens. This lens is not necessarily designed for live production, in my opinion. I know it can be used for live production. I know that you can use a digital 2x in the camera, which we're not going to dig into tonight. So you could essentially get a relative focal distance of 600 millimeters, but you're not going to get that ultra wide that you also normally get on a standard B4 lens that goes along with the telephoto. So
Fuji does make a 25 by 300 as well Cabrio lens.
Do they?
That is $42,000 for that lens, so it's an extra $10,000. But you get the 25 to 300, so you would get a decent wider.
Yeah,
shot.
10 more millimeters, 10 more wide. So yeah. One thing I do want to talk about, let's see, so let me make sure I'm digging through everything. So something that is great about this camera is it does have dual native ISO. It has an ISO of 800 and an ISO of 5000. And the reason they did that specifically on this camera with the live broadcast software is because when you put that B4 to PL and larger on this camera, then you actually do lose, I think it's about 2-ish stops of light. So running this, we're currently running it in ISO base 800. So when we switch the lens out, we'll be running in ISO base 5000, and it's essentially a dual gain feature, meaning that you can run this in lower light situations. And we've actually had this camera looking incredibly good in low light situations. We recently did some demos with it, and it produces a very desirable picture even in low light. And especially if you put the big Digipower 55 on it, that's going to let a lot of light in. You can get a very desirable results in this camera with low light. So that is something we'll be talking about probably later on in the week, just or later on next week as we dig in. Let's see. Pros are multiple codec recording and camera color grading, lightweight, flexible configurations. Cinema lenses offer creative control for depth of field and cinema style. Cons are the studio configuration does require some third-party components. Is that a huge con? Because Multidyne is awesome, so we will say that for a minute. It's not a huge con. This is a great company, and they have great products, definitely. So I'm not upset about using the Multidyne by any means. Lensing options. This is a native. This camera actually comes with a native EF mount. We put the PL mount on it, which is also a native mount option. Just because the Cabrio lens is a PL mount lens. Let's see, so it does use P2 media, which is something to keep in mind. And if I remember correctly, it does not record native RAW. So in order to record native RAW, you have to output from this camera to like an Atomos or something along those lines to get the RAW recording on this camera. Let's see, I think the only other thing that I want to talk about on this camera before we move on is the one of my favorite features about this camera is actually going to be the focus peaking. So Nate, if you want to switch to that camera, we are going to show this focus peaking on here, which I just think is insanely intuitive focus peaking. So
on the world's tiniest
viewfinder, we will mount a larger viewfinder to this. And
the quality of that camera is incredible, though.
Yeah, that is really good. We'll mount a larger viewfinder to this, and we will also probably even feed the viewfinder into the switcher so you guys can see this. And again, this is not on a great tripod. That's why it's so shaky. I'm also zoomed all the way in. And I'm not that great of a camera operator, so there's that too.
Nate's killing it, though.
Yeah. So anyway, as you can see, as I zoom out here, you see these little squares on here. And what that is that's essentially telling me when it's in focus. When the squares are large, it means that area is in focus. So if I move here, that means that all of that chip chart is now coming into focus. And I'll tighten in a little bit more. And I'm out of focus right now, but as I pull the right direction, there we go. You can see that now that chart is in focus. So I think that focus peaking on the VariCam is just insanely intuitive. And maybe we can get out of frame a little bit here and
show the garage door to the
we'll show the garage door
here. I can show it
because these are at two different depths,
and then I'll show it full screen. So focus up and I'll show it full screen.
But now you can see that that ladder there is in focus, and now I'll pull a little bit further, and now the chip chart's in focus. So these are at two different depths.
So do that one more time, and we're going to show it full screen here.
So now the ladder is in focus.
Yep. And now go back.
And now the chip chart is in focus.
Yeah, it shows it there. Yeah, it looks great. Hey, it really should be worth noting too, AJ, that is not a bad tripod. It's not a tripod made for a cinema camera.
Okay, this is like the first of the nicer tripods we started on. It's not the Skyline, but in general, it doesn't have a mid-level spreader and things like that. So it's not the most stable tripod.
That's an ENG tripod. So that's meant for field photographers to run around and throw down their camera as quick as possible and then catch the hero firefighter pulling the baby out of the house. So that's what that camera is.
Admittedly, the nicest tripod that we own is the one that Nate is currently operating on the manned cam. So we'll show it later. We'll show it in the coming streams. But anyway, that's our nicest tripod. That's why it looks so smooth as he's dollying around the shop. So
a lot of our tripods we're using tonight are Miller tripods.
Yeah.
I just want to do a quick shout out to them. They've been phenomenal. They make some really, really nice tripods for anything from your quick throwdown shots all the way up to what we'll be showing next, which is your big studio tripod.
The Skyline system in particular. So I actually have a great story, and this was actually a Tony story. Let's just say you should not demo big lenses without big tripods. And I'm sure if Tony's listening, he's definitely going to have a laugh at that. Because anyway,
that
was a fun time.
We're gonna next week on the podcast. We're gonna put the DigiPower 55 right there on a Amazon.com. Their number one recommended $100 tripod. It's happening live on stream. So make sure you tune back in.
No, we're not going to do that.
That's what insurance is for.
I know how to get those likes.
We can't. As you guys saw, we ran out of space here, but we are. Let's see. I can pull this off.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do some surgery. While you do the surgery, and if you haven't noticed the theme tonight, and we've got 20 minutes left here in the show, by the way. If you haven't noticed the theme tonight, we have gone from least expensive with the DSLR to then the Pocket Cinema camera, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 6K. Moved on to the camcorder, then to the PTZ camera. Now we've gone now to the VariCam or the URSA broadcast before that. And now, last but not least, certainly not least,
Jeez.
definitely not least, as we're going to find out here in a second, is going to be the 5500 with the Fujinon on it. But before we get to there, one last chance here. It's the last time I'm going to mention it. We've got 20 minutes left here in the stream. Like our Facebook page, P3, facebook.com/. Pro Production Podcast, as well as share this video. And we're going to give away here at the end of the show the Lavo swag pack. It's going to have some Lavo things in it, and they're cool. That's all I know for right now, but you should do that. And we're going to send that out to you courtesy of Lavo. So we'll be here next week again talking about broadcast cameras and more PTZ cameras. So check that out, facebook.com, again, /Pro Production Podcast. Next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're super excited to be with you. And for the next month, we're focusing all about cameras. We have even more cameras than this. I know that's amazing, but we have a lot of cameras right now sitting in our studio, and we're super excited to bring those cameras to you and dive in deeper. Right now, this is what we would consider a very base level overview of all of these cameras, but we're going to dive in deeper over the next upcoming weeks and figure out what makes these cameras work and the differences between them on a more detailed level. So
yeah, obviously, there's only so far we can get in 2 hours with 7 cameras. So anyway, here it is. The Hitachi ZHD 5500 and the Fuji Digipower 55. So there's actually been, I think, a lot of like memes focused around this camera right now because we had the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 6K jokingly standing on the back of it there for one.
I would love to see if we could maybe try to get a converter online and see if we can actually make that happen for an upcoming stream.
I'm done buying converters.
Okay.
I did see there was a YouTube video.
We'll go into that. We'll go into that next week. But the converter that we have, again, is not for the faint of heart to make this VariCam mount to the Digipower 55. But all that to say, it looks phenomenal. So it's definitely worth every penny to make it happen. So as configured, this is the Hitachi ZHD 5500. This camera, with the camera, RCP, viewfinder, everything, maybe with the exception of the SMPTE fiber cable, that's probably separate, roughly $35,000. So that's this is a 2/3 inch 3 CMOS HD TV camera. It is the first truly native broadcast camera that we've showed tonight. Well, and it's the only native broadcast camera that we showed tonight. So anyway, this is a 2/3 inch sensor, and then it is 3 separate CMOS sensors, and then all of that technology feeds down the SMPTE fiber line. Again, there's going to be tally, there's going to be intercom, there's going to be 12-volt outputs. Everything about this is designed to be kind of a run and gun camera. It's going to be built to plug in and go and look great. This lens is powered off from the camera here. That is also a nice thing that we will talk about later on. The VariCam is also the VariCam can natively power big lenses like this. So anyway, this is so this lens is powered off this camera. We do have the zoom and focus controls mounted right here on the dual pan bars. This is the Miller Skyline system. So this is a very beefy tripod. It is a 2-person job to set up, or one really strong person like me is capable of doing it. But anyway, as I knock over a water bottle. But no, I'm kidding. Nick had to help me set this up. So anyway, it's a very beefy tripod. A lot of parts and pieces to make all of this go together. So all in all, camera as kitted out the way we have it here is roughly a $149,000 system. So that is the the Hitachi ZHD 5500, the Fujinon 55 by lens, the Miller Skyline system. That's about a $22,000 support system for the camera. Obviously, you would not want to put a obviously, you would not want to put roughly a $90,000 lens on a cheaper tripod. So there you go. So anyway, the tripod itself, the support itself, you can't even really call it, we'll call it support. The support itself is about $22,000. SMPTE fiber cable, about $1,000. So anyway, so
See, that empty fiber cable's getting cheaper by the camera.
$1,000 sounds real expensive
Yeah,
for
you're
a
about,
cable, but then you
less
start
than
to,
1%.
Yeah, then you start to put it on cameras like this. It's not that expensive. So anyway,
It should be worth mention too. I don't know if we already did that. The way the viewfinder is mounted there is not normal. It's
I
just
really
because
like it, though.
the camera is up higher, so that's why the viewfinder. Normally, the viewfinder would be mounted on the top of the camera, but we're doing that since we've kind of stair-stepped the cameras up for the show tonight.
So let's talk pros through this camera. It is a natively 1080p camera that's actually relatively new in the newer broadcast cameras. Many of even the smaller cameras can only still do 1080i. This one is 1080p 5994. I do believe it has a 4K upscale option
in the
available as
CCU.
well in the CCU. And then let's see, it is also HDR, which we're not going to talk about, but it is a thing that's real important and it's coming. And HDR is probably even more, I would say HDR is more important than even 4K and in future workflows and even current workflows if you can scale for it. So let's see. Something to talk about is this camera is also a global shutter, so we won't dig too much into that tonight, but it essentially means that normal cameras are rolling shutters. So it essentially means that they're rolling from top to bottom to produce the image. So as opposed to the slow-mo guys have some great videos on that actually on YouTube. But it essentially means that the camera to produce the image is producing multiple lines all the way down. And rolling shutter can actually be very noticeable in high movement action. So you'll start to see people kind of skew a little bit. It can also cause some issues with LED walls. So this camera is extremely LED wall friendly because it has that global shutter. And that's just a great feature that Hitachi has included in this camera. Let's see.
It should be mentioned too, real quick, AJ. I'm being reminded by our. That's not our research department anymore. It's our advisory committee that we have here on staff. Just a lot of people in the room. That every price that we're mentioning tonight is also a street price. So that's not like what you would purchase that from Hitachi or one of these manufacturers or from a vendor. That this is all roughly street price. So this is MSRP. Is the pricing that we're giving out.
I do want to throw out why you say that, Nick. The Hitachi they have a great package with Fuji as well, where you can get the camera, the RCP, the viewfinder, even the fiber cable, and a phenomenal Fuji lens for around $38,000.
Yeah.
You don't have to go into these huge $90,000 lenses to use this camera. You can use one of the great ENG style lenses and go for about $38,000.
Yeah, and those still have a 2x extender.
2x
extender, a lot of great
extender,
focal length, and everything like that.
They're still phenomenal lenses on these cameras, so you don't have to jump up to the DigiPower 55 to get a great image.
Yeah. So we've only got a few minutes left, and we'll probably end up going a little bit over, but that's okay if we have to. So anyway, let's dig into the way we have this camera set up. Let's switch to this one, Nate, and I'll show the controls here. So we have a zoom and focus controller right here. Nice servo zoom and servo focus. And something to keep in mind is that, and I don't even know if this is on high speed. Is this on high speed, Nick?
I don't know. Speed control should be on the bottom. Unless it's not on the bottom, on the back side of it. It might have. Okay. Is it there?
Yeah.
Need me to show that real quick? Are we ready to show the camera? The moment everyone's been waiting for. Actually, really quick, AJ, let's talk to Nate. Stay right there on the camera. We have auxes on the side. What those are, that's all the return. So this by far has the most advanced controls for the operator of any camera that we have shown here, which is there's various communications. So the ENG and PD lines there for comm. The extender is obviously a servo-based extender. Stabilizer controls on there. It has the auxiliary return, so that's how you get your camera returns. On the bottom of that, there should be a snap-in for the zoom, which that should be on the bottom of the actual zoom control there, AJ, if it is.
Yeah.
and that snaps in immediately, so you can get focus as quick as possible, and then it goes to where the zoom last was. So there's this handheld controller alone is obviously a significant amount of money, but there's lots of different things like zoom limits,
not handheld
or hand servo controller. There's a lot going on here, which is one of the reasons why these lenses cost a little bit of money. But
yeah, I would definitely say that it, there's obviously a lot put into the glass on these lenses. There's just as much put into the mechanics of these lenses, the mechanics and the electronics of these lenses. When we go to this shot, you'll see kind of how quick it can zoom, how quick you can frame up. There's a lot of great things to be said about a big box television lens like this.
Also worth mentioning too, AJ, is that the actual servo controllers for the zoom and for the focus are independent servos on the bottom that are easily swappable on the lens. So in case a servo does die, they're easy to swap out. So, yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Oh, I need to. Anyway, so I've got it on the fastest zoom, I think now. So we'll switch to this camera in program. Is that in program?
It is.
All right, so this is as wide as it goes, and then this is as tight as it goes. So that is without the 2x extender. And let me pull focus on here really quick. Get that in focus. Jeez. And then you can flip in. So again, this is the same chart we've been shooting with everything else, kind of by far the tightest lens, obviously, as you would expect. And then we can also flip in the 2x extender. Now keep in mind, with the 2x extender, you are going to lose some light, but that's even closer. So obviously
looks terrible.
Well, yeah. in a shop environment with some fluorescent lighting and everything else, we should open the garage door and put a subject across the street or something, just so we can truly show the power of this lens instead of shooting it on a chip chart, which not everyone has a size reference for. But anyway,
we can take a look at my wet Jeep outside.
There we go. So anyway, that is essentially how quick the zoom is on a lens like this. So, and like I said, the 2x is just a switch here, which is a feature that so you don't have to reach up and do the 2x manually, which is kind of nice. So anyway,
and so you were talking about speed control. One of the nice things about a camera like this is that it has a speed control on it too. So where the other thing too is the travel of that zoom controller is huge. So I mean, it's literally a 90. I think if we can get a closer shot on that, it's 90 degrees almost that the zoom controller actually turns over.
Yeah, it goes pretty far, and you don't have to move very far. This is how slow it can go.
Yeah, it's very sensitive, and that's with the speed turned all the way up. So it makes pushes and pulls a lot easier on a zoom controller like that as well. Really, it's one of these cameras. If you're ever capable of attending something like NAB or Infocom, it's just fun to go to the Canon booth or any of the camera manufacturers,
Canon,
Sony, Fuji,
Hitachi, all of them.
Yeah, just to mess around with some of these cameras, because some of them obviously are not in many people's price point. So it's roughly one of the only times that you're ever going to get a chance to actually put your hands on one of these cameras. So.
Tyler Hart did have a question in chat, Nick. Is the DigiPower parfocal?
It is, yeah. So we didn't talk too much about that, but the DigiPower is parfocal. So what that essentially means is that it's going to maintain its focus throughout the range of its zoom. There are a few tricks to getting that to work on the URSA broadcast and the VariCam even, and that essentially you have to set what's called back focus. So we probably won't dig into that too much, but essentially you have to use a chart at the end, and then you can zoom in and focus, and then you zoom out and you set the back focus for the rear. And once you set that back focus, it essentially is supposed to maintain a parfocal, meaning that it's going to maintain focus throughout the zoom range. So that's very common in the broadcast world. Really, the way people are trained to focus is, you zoom as tight as you can on something, and then you focus, and then you zoom out, and supposedly, not supposedly, but anyway, that subject that you focused on when you were zoomed all the way in is then going to be in focus when you pull all the way back out. So that's definitely a great feature of, the Cabrio is parfocal. The Fuji that we have on the Blackmagic 8.5 to 170 is parfocal. This camcorder is technically parfocal. I'm not sure if they're doing anyway. It's parfocal, Same thing, PTZ. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a relative autofocus or not, but it is parfocal. And then the PTZ is parfocal. So that's definitely something to keep in mind that we didn't talk about on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K with the EF lens on it. Is not going to be parfocal, meaning that if you zoom in, focus, and then zoom out, it's not going to stay in focus. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. We already broke that camera down, so sorry we can't show that as an example. So let's see. What else do we need to go over on this camera? So this has a lot of HD SDI returns. So that means that you can do return video back to this camera, and you can also do additional sends from this camera. So that's another nice feature, is you can actually, I've seen it used where, like, say you have this camera at your front of house and you have like a small PTZ next to it. You can actually plug the PTZ into this camera and then use the same SMPTE fiber transport to get that signal out of your Hitachi CCU. And since it's SDI, it doesn't matter what kind of camera it is. It's just an open SDI channel that's available, most likely waveform division multiplex through this line that's available on the other end of the CCU.
We can also return, if you put a confidence monitor underneath of that camera, you can use those return lines there on the left to return a confidence monitor. And then also the camera operator could have a seconds viewfinder on there as well, mounted to the arm, kind of like we have it, which would allow them to, view program or multi-viewer, so that, if you're using something where you do a side-by-side, maybe it's a digital side-by-side, so you bring in graphics to one side. If the camera operator is looking at program, then they can frame that side-by-side accordingly as well. So lots of great features. And this is this camera specifically that we're showing today has the 550 CCU with it, which the 550 CCU is now Hitachi's new release as of NAB CCU that outputs
NAB 2020.
NAB 2020.
Let's
rip NAB 2020.
Oh, gosh.
It now the 550 here now outputs 1080p natively. And also has, I believe, don't hold me to this, I believe some cards you can stick in there that allow you to do SMPTE 2110 maybe, and
12G upscale,
and 4K 12G upscale as well.
Yeah, so that is also something to keep in mind. Is a lot of the broadcast cameras, a lot of these bigger broadcast cameras, because they're 2/3 inch sensors, I'm sure someone out there is going to correct me on this because I'm sure I'm wrong, but just to say it, I believe it is very hard to fit 4K worth of pixels on a 2/3 inch sensor.
I did the math last night. That's 8.6 million pixels, I believe, in 4K.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of pixels to fit on literally a 2/3 inch sensor. If someone can do it, let us know first. And we'll
I think as you'll see, a lot of the newer broadcast cameras that are being talked about that are 4K are 4K upscaled in the CCU, and the picture is still great. It is still a great picture quality. I think I would be hard pressed to see the difference between a native 4K versus a 4K upscale camera on majority of your day-to-day shooting. I just don't think we're gonna even experience that. I think in sports and everything else, that's something to keep in mind, is that even most of those workflows are still 4K upscale as opposed to native 4K. So
hey, real quick, we've got a couple minutes left. What I'd love to do here, AJ, if we're done with the Hitachi, I think that's all 7 cameras that we've gone through tonight. We need to do the giveaway, but right before we do the giveaway, here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you one more chance. I said I wouldn't, to share this page, share the video, even though it's over now, so it's redundant. But share the video so you're fair, and also go ahead and like the Facebook page, facebook.com/Pro-Production Podcast. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. And that's how you're going to win the Lavo swag pack. Lavo spelled Lawo. It's German, but it's pronounced Lavo.
Nick, I do think we should do it.
I want to switch through each camera.
Well, hold on.
We can.
We can't switch through each one because I disconnected 2 of them.
Oh, fantastic.
We disconnected the 6D.
They were in the way. We disconnected the 6D and the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. I do want to do a quick side-by-side because I do want to talk about the Hitachi briefly as it relates to this. Now, Brady, go ahead and do a side-by-side with the 350 and the Hitachi.
Yep.
Because not only does this speak to the power of the 350, so this that's moving is the 350 right there, and then this is the Hitachi. So as you can see, not only does this speak to the 350 and in general as to why I think it's a great camera for the price point, it also speaks to two things that we need to talk about, and that is, let's see, I am going to.
We'll go right to the 350 here. This is the Panasonic
tell.
AGCX 350. This is a camcorder.
So I don't want to oversaturate this picture, but I am going to brighten it up a little bit. So
Come down just a smidge, AJ.
Anyway, I do want to talk about the amount of light that this Hitachi camera can let in, and we don't have a great test for doing this because. So anyway,
Are you ready to go over? This is the 350.
so we have this at an Iris f-stop of roughly 8.0. Okay, so this is the Hitachi camera. So this is at an Iris f-stop of 8.0, and to give you an idea, the 350 is currently being shot at 7.2. Now I'm going to open this all the way up, which we're not
Panasonic.
gonna, yeah,
Hitachi.
and now this is the Hitachi. So I want to. In the coming weeks, we'll actually turn off some of the studio lights and do an actual low light test, just so you guys can kind of see what we're talking about. We don't have a lot of time to talk about it tonight, but we'll get out the light meter next week and find out how much light we're actually putting on that chart. But this is with the Iris open all the way up. No gain, no nothing. Iris open all the way up.
The gain actually, AJ, might be a -3 on the Hitachi.
Is it?
I believe I set it to -3.
It is. You're right. It's -3.
Yeah, so the gain's set to -3 on there to eliminate some noise.
So obviously that's not a great test tonight because we just have, like I said, we have the chart very well lit. But to give you an idea, these cameras, like I said, are great. Both great cameras. They obviously come in at very different price points, and there are a lot of features that justify the price point of the 5500. But if you are looking for a camera that is just a run and gun, ready to produce some videos, ready to just produce pictures, very easy to use, and easy out of the box, I would say the 350 is definitely a great camera for the price point. So
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of the only other thing I wanted to show, and we'll do more.
Bring down the 350 Iris a little bit.
Yeah, we'll do more low light tests whenever we get back into it later on in the week. So that is currently F10.
Cool.
So we'll do more low light tests as we get into it later on in the week. Next week, next Tuesday, we'll do some more low light tests. We'll turn down the studio lights, and we'll make sure to turn off the chip chart lights and kind of show you which of these cameras really, really shine in low light. And I can tell you, at least from the experience I have thus far, that the VariCam LT, the Hitachi 5500, and any camera that's really built in the true broadcast form factor, or even the VariCam, is just going to shine really well in low light.
Well, thank you, AJ. That was awesome tonight. Thank you, AJ and Brady both. And we're going to get into this more next week. Before we end real quick, it's time for the Lavo giveaway. So first off, Lavo, a bit about them. They're providing this swag pack tonight. Lavo designs and manufactures pioneering network control, audio, and video technology for broadcast and post-production, as well as live performance and theatrical applications. Products include control and monitoring systems, digital audio mixing consoles, routers, video processing tools, as well as solutions for IP-based AV infrastructure and routing systems. They're a German company, like I mentioned. Lavo providing the swag pack tonight, and the winner by random drawing is Trevor Wright. Trevor, you have won the swag pack, so we will get in touch with you, Trevor, and later on end up getting that swag pack out to you, once again provided by Lavo. Hey, we had a great show tonight. We're going to be back here next week, Tuesday, 7 Eastern time. Also, all of these episodes, the first 5 that we did, and now this is episode number 6 of P3, the Pro Production Podcast, are all available on demand at our YouTube and our Facebook page, and soon to be iTunes as well. We'll upload the last 6 episodes there too. Next Tuesday, we're back here. Before we leave, though, I want to thank a lot of people and a lot of companies that helped us make this stream possible and making the future streams possible as well. First off, the companies that have just given us stuff to have on the stream this week: Miller Tripods, Hitachi Broadcast, Fujinon Film Broadcast, Multidyne Fiber, Panasonic, and Ross Video, all providing equipment for the stream. So thank you to all of those companies. And then tonight in our studio, Brian Adams, our director, our producer, Roger Bishop, Jenny Fager on the phones, Brett Goodrich doing the graphics, Nate Rabb, the camera operator, did a great job tonight. And then thank you to AJ Fager, AJ, for doing all of the content tonight. He spent a lot of his week preparing the cameras and also preparing his presentation for you. So a big shout out to AJ for doing that. Our co-host, the guy who we didn't talk about what he ate and that there was a bunny over his head tonight, but Brady Davis. Always great to have Brady. And I'm Nick Olson. It's been great having you with us. We really hope to see you again next Tuesday. And until then, have a great time. Be safe. And we'll see you on the next episode where we focus on more broadcast and PTZ cameras on P3, the Pro Production Podcast. Good night, guys. Thank you for joining us.